So reference angles allow you to evaluate a trigonometric function for any angle theta. The sign of the trigonometric function value depends on the quadrant in which theta lies. Quadrant. So we're going to use steps to evaluate a trigonometric function for any angle. But what you do need to know first is the signs of the function values. So looking at quadrant 1, we know that those signs are positive, positive. X is positive, Y is positive. So therefore, sine of theta is positive, cosine theta is positive, and then tangent of theta is also positive. Quadrant 2, the X is negative, the Y is positive. So therefore, sine of theta, the Y value is positive. Cosine of theta, that is the X value is negative, and then tangent theta is Y over X, which is negative. Third quadrant is negative, negative. So sine of theta is negative, cosine theta is negative, but tangent of theta is actually positive because sine over cosine or Y over X is positive. Negative over negative is positive. And then quadrant 4, the X is positive, Y is negative. So sine of theta, the Y value is negative. Cosine of theta is positive, and the tangent of theta is negative. So one way to help remember this is that you have A, S, T, C. So in the first quadrant, all signs are positive. All of those values are positive. You know, sine is theta, then you also know that cosecant of theta is positive. Cosine is positive, therefore you know that secant theta is positive. Tangent of theta is positive, therefore cotangent of theta is positive, okay? Then in quadrant 2, the only one that's positive is sine of theta. Then for the third quadrant, the only one that's positive is tangent of theta. And then for the last one, cosine is positive. So one way to remember this is ASTC, or all students take calculus. It goes from quadrant 1, 2, 3, and 4. So ASTC is a way to remember that. So let's use that. Here we have tangent of negative 240 degrees. And so we need to evaluate these values, and this is a no calculator portion. So to go back to this one here, to look at what are the steps, you have to find the reference angle theta, so what we did earlier. Then you have to evaluate the trig function for that reference angle. Then the last thing is you determine the sign, whether it's positive or negative, of the trig function value from the quadrant in which theta lies. So in order to do that, one way that we want to figure these out is to make our own Quadrant One table. To do the Quadrant One, we need to take a look at certain values. So we're going to start with our degrees. Then the first one will be sine of theta, which is our y values. And then you are going to have cosine of theta, which would be your x values. So degrees, what we're going to look at is 0 degrees, 30 degrees, 45, 60, and 90 degrees. And one thing, in order to start this, is you need to know what number you start at. So one way to think about that is that thinking about quadrantal angles, this first point here, we want to look at sine. Sine is our y value. So what is the y value at 0 degrees? Remember, this point is x is 1, y is 0. So therefore, sine is 0. So start at 0. Then from here, you just do a pattern. So you have 0, you go down to 1, 2, 3, 4. Then for cosine, you do backwards. So it goes 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. The next thing that you do is you take the square root of each value. Square root each one. Then once you square root each value, you will divide by 2. And so you probably are starting to see our values for quadrant 1. The last part you want to do is simplify. So what happens is 0, square root of 0 over 2 is just 0. Square root of 1 over 2 is 1/2. Square root of 2 over 2 stays. Square root of 3 over 2 is the same. Square root of 4 over 2 is 2 over 2, which is 1. Then you simplify the right side. Square root of 4 over 2, that's 2 over 2, which is also 1. Square root of 3 over 2 stays the same. Square root of 2 over 2 stays the same. Square root of 1 over 2 is 1/2. And square root of 0 over 2 is 0. You could do the tangent of theta as well, but really, you have to remember that tangent of theta is just y over x. Another way to think about that, y, thinking back over here, y is really sine of theta over cosine of theta. Okay, so that's why we don't need to memorize. You just need to know sine and cosine, and remember that tangent is y over x. So let's finish up this problem. We have tan of negative 240 degrees. So we need to figure out what quadrant it lies in, negative 240. So if you look at this, negative 240, we're going to go in the clockwise direction. And then, so this is negative 90, this is negative 180, this is negative 270 degrees. So negative 240 is somewhere up here, negative 240 degrees. What we want to find is the reference angle. The reference angle is to the x-axis. That's what we're looking for. So just think about it. How far is 240 from 180? So that is 60 degrees. So remember, reference angles are always positive. So we're just looking at tangent of 40 degrees, and we're also in quadrant 2. So tangent of 60. Tangent is, again, sine over cosine. So we can say sine of 60 over cosine of 60 degrees. If you look at the table, sine of 60 degrees, sine of 60 degrees is right here, or 60 degrees is here. So sine is root 3 over 2. Cosine is 1/2. So to simplify that, root 3 over 2 times the reciprocal, 2 over 1. So the answer is square root of 3. Now again, we have to take a look at what quadrant is it in. So remember A, S, T, C. We're looking at tangent of 60 degrees, and we're in quadrant 2. So tangent is negative. The only one that's positive is sine. So that's how you do that problem. The next video will show example B.